Fireside Tailes with Wolfgang. Episode 30. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions YouTube channel, CAPS Media Television Channel 6, KPPQ-LP Ventura at 104.1 FM, and on the KPPQ Podcast Network. Greetings and salutations. I'm Hunter Ackerman, here to read some classic literature for you and my beastly feline companion Wolfgang. So Wolfus, what do you want to hear? Well, I'm breaking up with avocados. You heard me right. I did say avocados. So, I wrote a letter to avocados. Dear avocados, I think it's time we talk and reevaluate things between us. From the beginning, I don't feel like you've been fully straight with me. I mean, are you a fruit? Are you a vegetable? Is there some alligator in your background? Look, whatever you are and wherever you came from is fine. But I just need to know how to answer my parents' questions about you and your role in my life. And speaking of your role in my life, that's another thing. Are you a health food? Are you a diet food? Are you neither? The whole, yeah, but it's a good fat thing, frankly, it's starting to feel like gaslighting. I'm through with the side dishes life has to offer, and now I feel I'm ready for the main course. But the biggest problem is how unfairly we spend time. I wait and wait for you, sometimes weeks, sometimes even longer, just for you to feel ready. And then half the time you just crap out on me and say, too late, I'm done. And talk about mixed signals. Just this morning, after I waited over a month, when you finally indicated that you're ready, we open up and you're still too immature inside. I just think we need a little time apart. I'm not saying forever, but perhaps just a season or two. Wheatgrass has been calling lately, and maybe I am ready to explore that. I'll never forget the guacamole we made together. That'll always be special. But it's time I move on. This is The Walrus and the Carpenter. God, I love this poem. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. "It's very rude of him," she said, "to come and spoil the fun." The sea was wet as wet could be. The sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The walrus and the carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. "If only this were cleared away," they said, "it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, did you suppose," the walrus said, "that they could get it clear?" "I doubt it," said the carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. "Oh, oysters, come and walk with us," the walrus did beseech. "A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk, along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each." The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4. And thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The walrus and the carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. "The time has come," the walrus said, "to talk of many things. Of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings." But wait a bit, the oysters cried, "before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath and all of us are fat." "No hurry," said the carpenter, and they thanked him much for that. "A loaf of bread," the walrus said, "is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now, if you are ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed." "But not on us," the oysters cried, turning a little blue. "After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do." "The night is fine," the walrus said. "Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice." The carpenter said nothing but, "Cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf I've had to ask you twice." "It seems a shame," the walrus said, "to play them such a trick, after we've brought them out so far and made them trot so quick." The carpenter said nothing but, "The butter's spread too thick." "I weep for you," the walrus said. "I deeply sympathize." With sobs and tears, he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. "Oh, oysters," said the carpenter, "you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again?" But answer came there none, and this was scarcely odd, because they'd eaten every one. In 1871, Lewis Carroll wrote or published Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. This was the sequel to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, 1865. I think subsequent editions of Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, I think subsequent editions were edited down in title to just be called Through the Looking Glass. This poem is, of course, from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. This is Jabberwocky. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mumraths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the claws that catch, the jaws that bite. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went glumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Oh, come to my arms, my beamish boy, oh, frabjous day, Kahlil, Kahlil, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the momraths outgrabe. This story is largely about friendship. The thing to know going in is that Kipling lived from 1865 to 1936. So I'm not certain when this story specifically takes place, but it's probably... let's say this is probably in the late-ish 1800s. So the important thing to know is that it takes place in colonial India. So you've got like white, very British plantation owners and local Indian workers, and a lot of the animal labor came from elephants. This story follows the relationship of three such folks, and I am including elephants as folks. This is Motte Gouge, Mountaineer, by Rudyard Kipling. Once upon a time, there was a coffee planter in India who wished to clear some forest land for coffee planting. When he had cut down all the trees and burned the underwood, the stumps still remained. Dynamite is expensive and slow. The happy medium for stump clearing is the Lord of all beasts. Sorry, Wolfus, this time it's not cats. The Lord of all beasts that Kipling said were elephants. Yeah, it's cool, man. He will either push the stump out of the ground with his tusks, if he has any, or drag it out with ropes. The planter, therefore, hired elephants by ones and twos and threes and fell to work. The very best of all the elephants belonged to the very worst of all the drivers, or mahouts. And the superior beast's name was Motte Gouge. He was the absolute property of his mahout, which would have never been the case under native rule, for Motte Gouge was a creature to be desired by kings, and his name, being translated, meant the pearl elephant. Because the British government was in the land, Disa, the mahout, enjoyed his property undisturbed, and he was decadent. When he had made much money through the strength of his elephant, he would get extremely drunk and give Motte Gouge a beating with a tent peg over the tender nails of the forefeet. Motte Gouge never trampled the life out of Disa on these occasions, for he knew that after the beating was over, Disa would embrace his trunk and weep and call him his love and his life and the heart of his soul and give him some liquor. Motte Gouge was very, very fond of liquor. Arak, for choice. Though he would drink palm tree toddy if there was nothing better offered. Then, Disa would go to sleep between Motte Gouge's forefeet And as Disa generally chose the middle of the public road, and as Motte Gouge mounted guard over him and would not permit horse, foot, or cart to pass by, traffic was congested till Disa saw fit to wake up. There was no sleeping in the daytime on the planter's clearing. The wages were too high to risk. Disa sat on Motte Gouge's neck and gave him orders, while Motte Gouge rooted up the stumps, for he owned a magnificent pair of tusks. Or pulled at the end of a rope, for he had a magnificent pair of shoulders, while Disa kicked him behind the ears and said he was the king of elephants. At evening time, Motte Gouge would wash down his 300 pounds weight of green food with a quart of arak. Arak, by the way, it's kind of like Indian whiskey. Just go with that. And Disa would take a share and sing songs between Motte Gouge's legs till it was time to go to bed. Once a week, Disa led Motte Gouge down to the river, and while Motte Gouge lay on his side luxuriously in the shallows, while Disa went over him with a core swab and a brick. Now, Motte Gouge never mistook the pounding blow of the latter for the smack of the former that informed him to get up and turn over to the other side. Then Disa would look at his feet and examine his eyes, turn up the fringes of his mighty ears in case of sores or budding ophthalmia. After inspection, the two would come up with a song from the sea. Motte Gouge all black and shining, waving a torn tree branch 12 feet long in his trunk, and Disa knotting up his own long, wet hair. It was a peaceful, well-paid life, until Disa felt the return of the desire to drink deeply. He wished for an orgy. The little drafts that led nowhere were taking the manhood out of him. He went to the planter and, my mother is dead," said he, weeping. "She died on the plantation that we worked 2 months ago, and she died once before that when you were working for me last year," said the planter, who knew something of the ways of nativedom. "Then it is my aunt, and she was just the same as a mother to me," said Disa, weeping more than ever. "She has left 18 small children entirely without bread, and it is I who must fill their stomachs," said Disa, beating his head on the floor dramatically. "Who brought you the news?" said the planter. "The post," said Disa. "There hasn't been a post here for the past week. Now, get back to your lines." "A devastating sickness has fallen on my village, and all my wives are dying," yelled Disa, really in tears this time. "I will call to Chihun, who comes from Disa's village," said the planter. "Chihun, how's this man a wife?" "He," said Chihun, "no, not a woman of our village would look at him. They'd sooner marry the elephant," Chihun snorted. Disa wept and bellowed. "You will get into some more trouble in a minute," said the planter. "Go back to your work." "Now I will speak heaven's truth," gulped Disa with an inspiration. "I haven't been drunk for 2 months. I desire to depart in order to get properly drunk, far off and distant from this heavenly plantation. Thus, I shall cause no trouble." A flickering smile crossed the planter's face. "Disa," said he, "you've spoken the truth. Eventually. And I'd give you leave on the spot if anything could be done with Gouge while you're away. You know that he will only obey your orders. May the light of the heavens live 40,000 years. I shall be absent but 10 little days. After that, upon my faith and honor and soul, I return. As to the inconsiderable interval, have I the gracious permission of the heaven-born to call up Gouge? Permission was granted, and, in answer to Deesa's shrill yell, the lordly tusker swung out of the shade of a clump of trees where he had been squirting dust over himself till his master should return. O light of my heart, protector of the drunken, mountain of might, give ear, said Deesa, standing in front of him. Gouge gave ear and saluted with his trunk. I am going away, said Deesa. Gouge's eyes twinkled. He liked Jaunts as well as his master. One could snatch all manner of nice things from the roadside. But you Fosby old pig, you must stay behind and work. The twinkle died out as Gouge tried to look delighted. He hated stump hauling on the plantation. It hurt his teeth. I shall be gone for 10 days, O delectable one. Hold up your near forefoot, and I'll impress the fact upon it, warty toad of a dried mud puddle. Deesa took a tent peg and banged Gouge 10 times on the nails. Gouge grunted and shuffled from foot to foot. 10 days, said Deesa. You must work and haul and root trees as Chihun here shall order you. Take up Chihun and set him on your neck. Gouge curled the tip of his trunk. Chihun put his foot there and was swung on to the neck. Deesa handed Chihun the heavy Ankus, the iron elephant goad. Chihun thumped Gouge's bald head as a pavior thumps a curbstone, and Gouge trumpeted. Be still, hog of the backwoods. Chihun's your mahout for 10 days. Now, bid me goodbye, beast after my own heart. Oh, my lord, my king, jewel of all created elephants, you are the lily of the herd. Preserve your honored health. Be virtuous, my king. Adieu. Gouge lapped his trunk around Deesa and swung him up into the air twice. That was his way of bidding the man goodbye. He'll work now, he said to the planter. Have I leave to go? The planter nodded, and Deesa dived into the woods. Gouge went back to haul stumps. Chihun was very kind to him, but he felt unhappy and forlorn, notwithstanding. Chihun gave him balls of spices and tickled him under the chin, and Chihun's little baby cooed to him after work was over, and Chihun's wife called him a darling. But Gouge was a bachelor by instinct, as Deesa was. He did not understand the domestic emotions. He wanted the light of his universe back again. The drink and drunken slumber, the savage beatings and the savage caresses. Nonetheless, he worked well, and the planter wondered. Disa had vagabonded along the roads till he met a marriage procession of his own caste, and, drinking, dancing, and tippling, had drifted past all knowledge of the lapse of time. The morning of the 11th day dawned, and there returned no Disa. Motte Gouge was loosed from his ropes for the daily stent. He swung clear, looked around, shrugged his shoulders, and began to walk away as one having business elsewhere.
"Hi-ho! Come back, you!" shouted Chihun. "Come back and put me on your neck, misborn mountain! Return, splendor of the hillsides, adornment of all India, heave to, or I'll bang every toe off your fat forefoot."
Motte Gouge gurgled gently, but did not obey. Chihun ran after him with a rope and caught him up. Motte Gouge put his ears forward, and Chihun knew what that meant, though he tried to carry it off with high words. "None of your nonsense with me," said he. "To your pickets, devil son." "Hrump," said Motte Gouge, and that was all. That and the 4 bent ears. Motte Gouge, metaphorically, put his hands in his pockets, chewed a branch for a toothpick, and strolled about the clearing, making jest of the other elephants who had just set to work. Chihun reported the state of affairs to the planter, who came out with a dog whip and cracked it furiously. Motte Gouge paid the white man the compliment of charging him nearly a quarter of a mile across the clearing and harumphing him onto the veranda. Then he stood outside the house, chuckling to himself and shaking all over with the fun of it, as an elephant will. "We'll thrash him," said the planter. He shall have the finest thrashing that an elephant ever received. Give Kalanag and Nazim 12 foot of chain apiece, and tell them to lay on 20 blows. Kalanag, which means black snake, and Nazim were 2 of the biggest elephants in the lines. And one of their duties was to administer the graver punishments, since no man can beat an elephant properly. The elephants took the whipping chains and rattled them in their trunks as they sidled up to Motte Gouge, meaning to hustle him between them. Motte Gouge had never, in all of his life of 39 years, been whipped, and he did not intend to open new experiences. So, he waited, weaving his head from right to left and measuring the precise spot in Kalanag's fat side where a blunt tusk would sink deepest. Kalanag had no tusks. The chain was his badge of authority, but he judged it good to swing wide of Motte Gouge at the last minute and seemed to appear as if he had brought out the chain for amusement. Nazim turned round and just went home early. He did not feel fighting fit that morning, and so Motte Gouge was left standing alone with his ears cocked. That decided the planter to argue no more, and Motte Gouge rolled back to his inspection of the clearing. An elephant who will not work and is not tied up is not quite so manageable as an 81-ton gun loose in a heavy seaway. He slapped old friends on the back and asked them if the stumps were coming away easily. He talked nonsense concerning labor and the inalienable rights of elephants to a long nooning, which is kind of like the Hobbit equivalent of a second breakfast. and wandering to and fro thoroughly demoralized the entire garden until sundown, when he returned to his pickets for food.
If you won't eat, if you won't work, you shall not eat, said Chihun angrily. You're a wild elephant and no educated animal at all. Go back to your jungle.
Chihun's little brown baby, rolling on the floor of the hut, stretched its fat arms to the huge shadow in the doorway. Motte Gouge knew well that this baby was the dearest thing on earth to Chihun. He swung out his trunk with a fascinating crook at the end, and the little brown baby threw itself shouting upon it. Motte Gouge made fast and pulled up till the brown baby was crowned in the air 12 feet above his father's head.
Great chief, said Chihun. Flour cakes of the best, 12 in number, 2 feet across and soaked in rum shall be yours on the instant. And 200 pounds weight of fresh cut young sugar cane therewith. Deign only to put down safely that insignificant brat who is my heart and who is my life to me.
Motte Gouge tucked the brown baby comfortably between his 4 feet that could have knocked into toothpicks all of Chihun's hut, and waited for his food. He ate it, and the little brown baby crawled away. Motte Gouge dozed and thought of Disa. One of many mysteries connected with the elephant is that his huge body needs less sleep than anything else that lives. 4 or 5 hours in the night suffice. 2 just before midnight, lying down on one side. 2 just after 1 o'clock, lying down on the other. The rest of the silent hours are all filled with eating and fidgeting and long grumbling soliloquies. At night, therefore, Motte Gouge strode out of his pickets, for a thought had come to him that Disa might be lying drunk somewhere in a dark forest with no one to look after him. So, all that night, he chased through the undergrowth, blowing and trumpeting and shaking his ears. He went down to the river and blared across the shallows where Disa used to wash him, but there was no answer. He could not find Disa, but he disturbed all the elephants in the lines and nearly frightened to death some gypsies in the woods. At dawn, Disa returned to the plantation. He had been very drunk indeed, and he expected to fall into trouble for outstaying his leave. He drew a long breath when he saw that the bungalow and the plantation were still uninjured, for he knew something of Motte Gouge's temper. And he reported himself with many lies and salams. Motte Gouge had gone to his pickets for breakfast. His night exercise had made him hungry. "Call up your beast," said the planter. And Disa shouted in the mysterious elephant language that some mahouts believe came from China at the birth of the world, when elephants and not men were masters. Motte Gouge heard, and he came. Elephants do not gallop. They move from spots at varying rates of speed. If an elephant wished to catch an express train, he could not gallop. But he could catch the train. Thus, Motte Gouge was at the planter's door almost before Chihun noticed that he had left his pickets. He fell into Disa's arms, trumpeting with joy, and the man and beast wept and slobbered over each other and handled each other from head to heel to see that no harm had befallen. "Now we will get to work," said Disa.
Lift me up, my son, and my joy.
Motte Gouge swung him up, and the two went to the coffee clearing to look for irksome stumps. The planter was too astonished to be angry. Rudyard Kipling made as well-developed a character out of the elephant as he bothered to make out of any of the humans. And, yeah. Good show, Kipling. Good show, old boy. I didn't know this. Emily Dickenson wrote almost 2,000 poems. She passed away in 1886. But less than those close to 2,000 poems that she wrote, less than a dozen were published in her lifetime. Wow. Talk about internal motivation. That is incredible. Her work that was actually published was heavily edited to fit the convention of the times. Not until 1955 was a complete and unedited edition of her poetry finally released. Wow. Hope is the thing with feathers. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. The sweetest in the gale is heard, and the sore must be the storm that could bash the little bird that kept so many warm. I heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity has it asked a crumb of me. A poem called Love One Another by Kahlil, Gibran. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another of your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone, even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping, for only the hand of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. It's a little reminiscent of The Gift of the Magi. Because it's this wonderful telling of love fully, but don't expect to completely own each other. It's a balance. This is called Thinking by Walter D. Wintle. He was a late 19th century poet. If you think you're a beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but think you can't, it is almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out of the world, we find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but soon or late, the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. This is by Edna St. Vincent Millay. This poem is called First Fig, and it was written in Millay's collection A Few Figs from Thistles in 1920. And this actually won the Nobel Prize for Poetry, not until 1923. She was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize for Poetry. She used verse as a medium for feminist activism. Now that we're back in the roaring 20s again, this is The First Fig by this is The First Fig by Edna St. Vincent Millay, published in 1920. My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light. Okay. I'm going to squeeze in one more Millay poem just because it's so short. Second Fig, also from 1920. Safe upon the solid rock the ugly houses stand. Come see my shining palace built upon the sand. Transience in Arcadia by O. Henry. There's a certain hotel on Broadway that is very pleasant in the summer. Not many people have heard about it. It is wide and cool. Its rooms have walls of dark wood. There are green trees about it and soft winds. It has all the pleasures of mountain living and none of the pains. You will eat better fish than you could catch for yourself in streams in the hills. You will have better meat than a hunter brings home from the forest. A few have discovered this cool spot in the hot summer of New York. You will see these few guests eating dinner in the hotel restaurant. They're happy to be there and happy to know that they are very few. They feel especially wise because they have found this delightful place. More waiters than necessary are always near. They bring what is wanted before anyone asks for it. The pleasing, distant noise of Broadway sounds like running water in a forest. At every strange footstep, the guests turn quickly and look. They're afraid that the restless pleasure seekers will find their hotel and destroy its pleasant quiet. And so, these few live during the hot season. They enjoy the delights of mountain and seashore. All is brought to them in their Broadway hotel. This summer, a lady came to the hotel giving the name Madame Hellois d'Arcadie Beaumont. Her name was like a name in the story of a great romance, and Madame Beaumont was the kind of lady that the Hotel Lotus loved. She was beautiful, and her manner was very fine. Everyone wished to serve her. The other guests believed that as a guest, she was perfection. This perfect guest did not often leave the hotel. In this, she was like the other guests of the Hotel Lotus. To enjoy that hotel, one needed to forget the city. New York might have been miles away. At night, sometimes one might go out, but during the hot day, one remained in the cool shade of the Lotus. Madame was alone in the Hotel Lotus. She was alone as a queen is alone because of her high position. She rose from bed late in the morning. She was then a sweet, soft person who seemed to shine quietly. But at dinner, She was different. She would wear a beautiful dress. I cannot find words fine enough to tell about it. Always there were red flowers at her shoulder. When the head waiter saw a dress like this, he met it at the door. You thought of Paris when you saw it, and of the theater, and of old romances. A story about Madame Beaumont was told among the guests in the Hotel Lotus. It was said that she was a woman who had traveled all over the world. It was said that she knew the most important people everywhere. It was said that in her white hands she held the future of certain nations. It was no surprise, they said, that such a lady should choose the Hotel Lotus. It was the most desirable and the most restful place in America during the heat of the summer. On the third day of Madame Beaumont's stay in the hotel, a young man entered as a guest. His clothes were quiet, but good. His face was pleasant. His expression was that of a man who had traveled and could understand the world. He said that he would remain 3 or 4 days. He asked about the sailing of certain ships. He seemed to like this hotel the best of all he had known. The young man put his name on the list of hotel guests. Harold Farrington. It was a name with a fine sound, and the young man belonged perfectly in the quiet life of the Lotus. In 1 day, he became like all the other guests. Like them, he had his table and his waiter. He also had the same fear that the wrong people might suddenly discover this hotel and destroy its peace. After dinner on the next day, Madame Beaumont dropped something as she passed Harold Farrington's table. He picked it up, and, following her, he returned it. He spoke only a few quiet words as he did this, and she was pleased by his good manners. She knew that he was a gentleman. Guests of the Lotus seemed to understand each other very easily. Perhaps it was the result of having discovered this Broadway hotel. Guests felt sure that only especially fine people would enjoy the cool delights of the Lotus. Now, very quickly, a sudden friendship grew between Farrington and Madame Beaumont. They stood and talked for a few moments. "I have seen too many of the usual summer hotels," said Madame Beaumont, with a small but sweet smile. "Why go to the mountains or the seashore? We cannot escape noise and dust there. The people who make the noise and dust follow us there." "Even on the ocean," said Farrington sadly, "those same people are all around us. What shall we do when they discover the Lotus?" "I hope they don't discover the Lotus this week," said Madame. "I only know of one other place I like as well. It is the beautiful home of a prince in the mountains in Europe." "The best people," said Farrington, "are seeking for the quiet places like this one where they can escape the crowds." "I promise myself 3 more days of this delightful rest," said Madame Beaumont. "The next day, my ship, she sails." Harold Farrington's eyes showed that he was sorry. "I too must leave then," he said. "But I am not sailing for Europe." "I cannot stay here forever, though it is so delightful," said Madame Beaumont. "I like it better than my usual life, which is too full of people. I shall never forget my week in the Hotel Lotus." "Nor shall I," said Farrington in a low voice, "and I shall never like the ship that carries you away. On their last evening, the two sat together at a little table. A waiter brought them something cool to eat. Madame Beaumont was wearing the same beautiful dress. She seemed thoughtful. When she had finished eating, she took out $1. Mr. Farrington, she said, with a smile that everyone in the Lotus loved. I want to tell you something. I'm going to leave early tomorrow morning because I must go back to work. I work selling women's clothes at Casey's shop. That $1 is all the money I have. I won't have more until I get paid at the end of the week. You are a real gentleman and you've been good to me. I wanted to tell you before I went. For a year, I've been planning to come here. Each week I put aside a little of my pay so that I would have enough money. I wanted to live 1 week like a rich lady. I wanted to get up in the morning when I wished. I wanted to be served by the waiters. I wanted to have the best of everything. Now I've done it and I've been happier than I ever was before. And now I'm going back to work. I wanted to tell you about it, Mr. Farrington, because I thought you liked me and I liked you. This week I've told you many things that weren't true. I told you things I've read about. They never happened to me. I've been living in a story. It wasn't real. I wanted you to think I was a great lady. This dress I'm wearing, it's the only pretty dress I own. I haven't paid for it yet. I'm paying for it a little at a time. The price was $75. It was made for me at O'Dowd and Levinsky's shop. I paid $10 first, and now I have to pay $1 a week until it's all paid. And that's all I have to say, Mr. Farrington, except that my name is Mamie Seviter, not Madame Beaumont. Thank you for listening to me. This $1 is the $1 I'm going to pay for my dress tomorrow. And now I go up to my room. As Harold Farrington listened, his face had not changed. When she had finished, he took out a small book and began to write in it. Then he pulled out the small page with his writing on it, and he gave it to her. And he took the $1 from her hand. I go to work too, tomorrow morning, he said. And I decided to begin now. That paper says you've paid your $1 for this week. I've been working for O'Dowd and Levinsky for 3 years. Strange, isn't it? We both had the same idea. I always wanted to stay at a good hotel. I get $20 a week. Like you, I put aside a little money at a time until I had enough. Listen, Mommy, will you go to the pleasure park on Coney Island with me on payday? The girl who had been Madame Eloise Beaumont smiled. I'd love to go, Mr. Farrington. Coney will be all right, although we did live here with rich people for a week. They could hear the night noises of the hot city. Inside the Hotel Lotus, it was cool. The waiter stood near, ready to get anything they asked for. Madame Beaumont started up to her room for the last time. And he said, forget that Harold Farrington, will you? McManus is the name. James McManus. Some call me Jimmy. Good night, Jimmy, said Madame. By D.H. Lawrence. This is called A Winter's Tale. Yesterday the fields were only gray with scattered snow, and now the longest grass leaves hardly emerge. Yet her deep footsteps mark the snow and go on toward the pines at the hill's white verge. I cannot see her, since the mist's white scarf obscures the dark wood and the dull orange sky, but she's waiting, I know, impatient and cold, half sobs struggling into her frosty sigh. Why does she come so promptly when she must know that she's only the nearer to the inevitable farewell? The hill is steep on the snow, my steps are slow. Why does she come when she knows what I have to tell? This song, wow, wrong show. This poem is called A Coat by William Butler Yeats. I made my coat. Let's start this over. This poem is called A Coat by William Butler Yeats. I made my song a coat covered with embroideries out of old mythologies from heel to throat. But the fools caught it, wore it in the world's eyes as though they had wrought it. Song, let them take it, for there is more enterprise in walking naked. From Robert Burns. This is called A Red, Red Rose. Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love is like the melody that's sweetly played in tune. So fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I, and I will love thee still, my dear, until the seas gan dry. Till all the seas gone dry, my dear, and the rocks melt with the sun, I will love thee still, my dear, when the sands of life shall run, and fare thee weel, my only love, and fare thee weel a while, and I will come again, my love, though it were 10,000 mile. This is another poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay. Published in 1917, this is Afternoon on a Hill. I will be the gladdest thing under the sun. I will touch 100 flowers and not pick one. I will look at the cliffs and the clouds with quiet eyes. Watch the wind bow down the grass and the grass rise. And when the lights begin to show up from the town, I will mark which one must be mine, and then start down. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Fireside Tales with Wolfgang. To view more of my work, check out my YouTube channel at Hunter's Acoustic Cabin. Directed by Hunter Ackerman. Produced by GWC Productions. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions YouTube channel, CAPS Media Television Channel 6, KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM, and on the KPPQ Podcast Network.